You didn't hear a message. You didn't receive a sign. But something shifted. You felt it in your chest. A soft release, a strange calm. Not peace exactly, but the absence of resistance, as if something heavy was finally put down. And somehow, it wasn't yours. That's because he just let go. Not with words, not in public, not in a grand act of awakening, but in the deepest silence, the divine masculine gave up the fight. He's done pretending he doesn't feel it. Done trying to fix his life without facing his truth. Done chasing everything that kept him away from himself and from you. This isn't about contact. It's not about a message or a call or a sudden appearance. This is deeper. It's the moment his soul said yes to the love, to the mission, to the reckoning. And that one internal shift just changed everything, because the moment he surrenders, the field realigns. The old timeline ends, and the reunion begins, not with his arrival, but with your recognition. You felt it, didn't you? Something just finished, and now something new is preparing to begin. Chapter 1. He's done running, and it changes everything. There's a moment that no one sees, not even him. A moment that doesn't look dramatic, doesn't make noise, doesn't arrive with clarity or words, but it happens. It happens in the stillness between heartbeats, in the weight of a breath he didn't know he was holding, in the silence after yet another night where he couldn't sleep. It's the moment his soul stops running. And when it happens, the whole field begins to shift. You may not see him reach out. You may not hear an apology. You may not even get the closure you thought you needed. But inside him, something surrendered. Not because he figured it all out, but because he's exhausted from trying to outrun a truth that never left. He's tired of hiding, tired of avoiding, tired of pretending he doesn't feel what he's felt since the very beginning. And what he's finally realizing is that all the chasing in the world, chasing success, validation, distractions, even healing, can't silence the ache of not being whole. Because he knows now he left something behind. Not just you, but the version of himself that only exists when he's honest. And that version is calling him home. You've felt it, haven't you? That subtle but undeniable shift. The pull in your chest. The sudden stillness in your soul, as if something was released, and the weight you'd been carrying for both of you dropped. That's the field realigning. Because when the divine masculine stops running, it doesn't look like a reunion. It looks like a collapse. His old self, the one who built walls instead of bridges, begins to break. The distractions lose their power. The numbing doesn't work anymore. The masks start to itch. The silence becomes unbearable. And yet, he doesn't fully understand what's happening. To him, it might feel like depression, like anxiety, like emotional chaos he can't explain. But to his soul, it's the first step toward home. This shift doesn't begin with a message to you. It begins with a confrontation inside him, a whisper that becomes a roar. You can't live like this anymore. And he listens, not with logic, but with surrender. He may not tell anyone. He may not have the words, but the energy doesn't lie, and neither do the symptoms. He starts waking up tired, even after sleep, losing interest in things that used to distract him, feeling triggered by memories that used to be buried, longing for something he can't name, but that feels like you. That's how you know. Because when he's done running, the body becomes the messenger. The reality begins to unravel. The people, places, and patterns that kept him away from his heart start to fall away. And he's not sure why. He just knows it's time. This isn't romantic. It's not graceful. It's not even beautiful. But it's holy. It's the breakdown before the breakthrough. The fall before the rise. The moment when resistance ends and alignment begins. And you feel it in your bones. You stop checking your phone. You stop wondering what he's thinking. You stop trying to fix what was never yours to carry. Because your soul knows he's finally facing himself. And that changes everything. You no longer feel the weight of waiting. Because you're not waiting, you're aligning, you're not hoping, you're becoming. And that's why this surrender matters. Not because it brings him back right away, but because it releases you from the old timeline. You don't have to prove your worth. You don't have to explain your pain. You don't have to carry both ends of the cord anymore. Because now, finally, he's picking up his side. Not perfectly, not loudly, but truly. This is how the next chapter begins. Not with a door swinging open, but with a whisper that says, I'm still here. And I'm ready to face what I couldn't before. And whether or not he speaks it out loud, your heart already knows it's true because everything feels different now. Because he's different now. Because you are. And the reunion, it doesn't begin with a message. It begins with a surrender. And he just surrendered in silence, in spirit, in soul. Why his surrender looks like silence. When the divine masculine finally surrenders, he doesn't announce it. He doesn't show up at your door with a heart wide open. He doesn't send a message explaining every reason he hurt you. He doesn't even admit to himself that he's surrendered, because his surrender doesn't look like action. It looks like silence. And that's where many feminines get caught. You've been taught to associate silence with avoidance, to believe that no contact means no care, that distance equals disconnection. But what if that silence is actually the sound of the old version of him dying? What if what you're interpreting as he's gone is actually he's finally sitting with what he used to run from? Because when the masculine surrenders, he enters a sacred space of unraveling. And unraveling isn't pretty. It isn't poetic. It isn't strong or stable or comforting. It's raw, chaotic, humbling. He's not quiet because he doesn't care. He's quiet because he's overwhelmed, because he doesn't trust his voice yet, because for the first time, he isn't reaching for a performance. He's sitting in the presence of his own naked truth. Can you imagine how terrifying that is for someone who's built his whole identity around control? And here's where it gets even more paradoxical. He feels you more than ever in the silence. Your energy doesn't go away when he pulls back. In fact, it echoes louder, because without distractions, he can't drown it out anymore. And that echo, it brings everything up. The memories, the missed moments, the words he never said, the truth he buried under logic and pride. Have you ever been in a room so quiet you could hear your own heartbeat? Now imagine that, but emotionally, that's where he is. Silence isn't passive, it's a portal. And right now, he's inside it. So while you may look at the absence of movement as a setback, know this. He is not doing nothing. He's dismantling. The mask is coming off. The protector is burning out. The false masculine, the one who needed to dominate, prove, or disappear, is cracking. And when that part of him starts to break, the real work begins. But he doesn't know how to do this out loud. He doesn't have the language yet. He doesn't know how to speak love when all he's known is survival. So he goes silent, not to reject you, but to find himself again. Have you ever done that? Have you ever gone quiet because the noise inside was too much to carry? Have you ever disappeared, not because you didn't love someone, but because you couldn't love yourself in that moment? This is his moment, and your soul knows it. You've felt the difference, haven't you? His silence used to feel cold, Now it feels full, like there's something happening beneath it, something sacred, heavy, unfinished. Because this silence isn't absence, it's presence with his own pain. He's listening now to the parts of himself he used to numb, to the voice that always whispered your name beneath the layers of logic and fear. He's not trying to erase you anymore. He's trying to understand why he ever thought he had to. And that journey can't be narrated. It must be lived. That's why he's so quiet, because the truth is loud, and he's not ready to say it out loud until it stops shaking him from the inside. Your role here isn't to chase him back into motion. It's to hold the field steady while he rebuilds. It's to trust the silence, to see the surrender in it, not despite it. To recognize that his distance may be the first real step toward closeness he's ever taken. That doesn't mean you wait. It means you walk forward in your light, in your power, in the wholeness you've cultivated without needing his confirmation. Because this shift isn't just his, it's yours. His silence is inviting you to listen to yourself more deeply, to the parts of you that still wanted external validation, to the ache that wanted proof, to the wound that feared being forgotten. And when you meet those places with presence, you become the anchor that his soul recognizes, not because you're holding space for him, but because you held it for you. That's what activates him, not your effort, not your explanation, but your embodiment, because energy doesn't lie, and the frequency of a feminine who no longer abandons herself is louder than any message he's afraid to send. So don't fear the silence. Read it, feel it, trust what it's doing, because the masculine isn't gone. He's finally going in, and what he finds there will change the way he shows up in every timeline after this one. Before anything changes in the physical, you feel it. Before he reaches out, you already sense his thoughts circling back. Before he surrenders to the connection, you feel your own heart softening, not from hope, but from knowing, because the divine feminine feels the shift first, not because she's chasing, not because she's obsessed, but because she's always been the anchor. Your energy has always been tuned to the undercurrents, to the invisible waves, to the unseen shifts between timelines. And lately, hasn't it been stronger? Have you found yourself crying for no reason? Waking up with a pressure in your chest you couldn't explain? Feeling both deeply calm and intensely emotional in the same hour? That's not your breakdown. That's the ripple of his. Because when the divine masculine begins to surrender, you feel the echo before he even realizes what's happening. And that's not your imagination, it's your design. You are the intuitive bridge between the seen and the unseen, between the story and the soul, between his silence and the frequency behind it. And here's the truth no one tells you. When he starts to shift, even unconsciously, your body becomes the tuning fork, that subtle ache in your heart. It's not heartbreak, it's attunement, that fatigue in your bones. It's the weight of timelines closing, that sudden wave of love and grief at the same time. It's your system adjusting to the union that's not yet here, but already arriving in spirit. Because union never begins with a message. It begins in energy, and your energy feels the field rearranging before the human story catches up. But here's the part that's hard. You feel him awakening, but he still doesn't show up. You sense his pain, but he still doesn't speak. You hold his frequency in your heart, but your 3D world shows no proof. And this, beloved, is where many feminines collapse. Because how do you trust what you can't see? How do you hold faith in a truth that hasn't yet been spoken? How do you stay anchored in your own becoming when his delay feels like abandonment? The answer isn't in pushing, it's in deepening. Because this stage of the journey isn't about patience, it's about power. Your power to stay seated in your sovereignty, even while everything around you feels unresolved. Because while he dissolves, you are rising. You are becoming the version of you who doesn't just feel energy, she channels it. She alchemizes it. She walks through timelines with clarity and command because she no longer needs to be chosen. She is the choice. And that energy, that's what reaches him. Not your longing, not your waiting, not your hope, but your embodiment. The feminine feels the shift first because she's the one who anchors the new frequency. You hold the field open, not by reaching toward him, but by expanding within you. You become the sanctuary he can feel, even in silence. You become the mirror that doesn't reflect his wounds, but his possibility. And even if his ego resists, his soul is already moving toward you. So when you feel the ache, don't collapse. When you feel the pull, don't assume it's fantasy. When you feel the heaviness, don't run from it. Ask it what it's here to show you. Ask yourself, what if this pain isn't mine to heal, but his to feel through me? What if this silence isn't distance, but a space being cleared for truth? What if this strange peace in the middle of chaos is alignment? Because it is. You are aligning with the version of you that doesn't need his confirmation to know the path is real. You feel it first because you're built to, and not so you carry it all again, but so you know what to release. Because just like he's shedding the false masculine, you're shedding the over-functioning feminine. You're not the savior, you're not the seeker, you're not the chaser, you're the soul that already became what he's now being called into. So feel it, let it move through you, let it burn what's no longer yours to hold. And remember, you don't feel more because you're weaker. You feel more because you're ready. You were always going to feel it first, because you were always the one who saw what this really was, even when he couldn't. And now, finally, his energy is catching up to your vision. You're not crazy, you're not broken, you're not alone. You're on the edge of reunion, and your soul already knows. He's feeling you too. What you must anchor now. The energy is shifting. You've felt it in your body, your dreams, your emotions. You've noticed how the old illusions fall apart faster, how you no longer resonate with the same distractions, how your own longing has transformed into clarity. And now you are being asked to anchor, not to wait, not to fix, not to bend or explain or prove, but to anchor. Because if union is truly on the horizon, then the feminine must hold a new frequency, one that cannot be shaken by the masculine's delay, one that does not crumble under confusion, one that no longer negotiates with what her soul already knows. Can you feel it? That subtle urgency in your chest, that call to stand firm in your light. Even if no one else joins you right now, that is the call to anchor, because the field is recalibrating, and what you embody now determines what unfolds next. This is not the time to question the path. It's the time to walk it, even if you walk alone, because while he dissolves, you are being rebuilt. The divine feminine must become unshakable, not in force, but in alignment, not in hardness, but in wholeness, not in resistance, but in radiance. And here's what that means. You must anchor truth. The truth of who you are, even if no one else validates it. The truth of what you feel, even if others call it delusion. The truth of the connection, even when silence tries to make you doubt. Anchoring truth doesn't mean holding on to fantasy. It means you no longer abandon what your soul has shown you, even if your mind doesn't understand it. You must anchor embodiment, not the old version of divine feminine that dimmed herself to stay available, not the version that performed love to be seen as worthy, but the woman who is already love, already enough, already aligned. the woman who doesn't chase the masculine but embodies the energy that calls him forward without saying a word. Can you be her now? Can you hold the vibration of the woman he will meet before he's ready to meet her? That's what anchoring means. You become the mirror of his potential, not by speaking it, but by living it. You must anchor vision, because if you lose sight of the bigger picture now, you'll shrink yourself into old stories. This isn't about getting him to message you. This isn't about tracking his behavior or decoding his silence. This is about preparing the space for the next version of the connection to land. And that space must be built inside you. So if he were to arrive tomorrow, would your energy be ready to receive? Would your nervous system feel safe in love? Would your boundaries be clear? Would your radiance remain intact if he's still healing? This is your anchoring ground. This is where the real feminine power is activated, not in holding on to him, but in holding on to yourself. Because he is not your purpose, you are. And when you walk in purpose, you naturally align with every soul who is meant to rise beside you, without pulling, without waiting, without shrinking. So ask yourself gently, what do I still hope he'll give me that I haven't yet given myself? What part of me wants to slow down my expansion until he catches up? What would it feel like to anchor love without needing a witness? These questions are sacred keys. They unlock the parts of you that still hold yourself back in the name of loyalty. But true loyalty isn't shrinking. It's expanding into who you were always meant to be, so you can call in the masculine from your future, not your past. So as he collapses the false, you must rise in the real. And that requires you to root deeply in your center, to release the noise, to stand in the stillness that speaks louder than any longing. You've done the work. You've waited in love. You've faced your own shadows. And now you anchor. For the feminine who anchors in truth becomes the portal through which union can finally enter, not because she forced it, but because she became the frequency of it. You may not see it in his words. You may not see it in his actions. He might still be silent, still distant, still pretending nothing inside him has changed. But something has, and it's irreversible. Because the version of him you once knew, the one who ran, the one who rejected, the one who hid, no longer exists, even if he doesn't realize it yet, even if he's still trying to wear the same mask, even if he's still acting like the man who once pushed love away, even if he's still clinging to the illusion of control. that old self is gone, not through logic, not through therapy, not through strategy, but through spiritual combustion. The kind of collapse that doesn't make sense to the mind, only to the soul. And you've felt it, haven't you? That subtle shift in the field, that energetic release, that invisible click where something just feels different, not just in him, but in you. Because when the masculine reaches the end of his false self, the feminine feels it, like a cord snapping in the ethers, like a silent exhale from a soul that finally stopped pretending. And yet, on the surface, he may still look the same. He may still go to work, smile at people, post photos, keep busy, but internally, he's disoriented, confused, unmoored, because the identity he built to survive, to feel safe, to feel strong, to feel accepted, has quietly disintegrated. He doesn't know who he is anymore. He doesn't know what he's supposed to chase, what he believes, who he's trying to impress. What used to give him purpose now feels flat. What used to numb him now feels loud. And what used to feel like you, the image of the feminine he told himself he could avoid, is now everywhere. In his dreams, in songs, in the moments between distractions, in the ache beneath his chest he can't name, because without his false self to block it, your energy is flooding in, not in desperation, not in romance, but in truth, the kind of truth that makes everything else feel like a lie. So while he may be telling himself he hasn't changed, his nervous system says otherwise. He's restless, he's agitated, he's nostalgic for a life that hasn't happened yet, and haunted by what he couldn't choose before. He might not call it awakening, he might not recognize it as a spiritual death, he might not have the words for what he's feeling. But his soul knows. His soul has been quietly whispering, you can't go back. You're not who you were. She's not waiting in the past. She's anchored in the future. Meet her there. But to meet you in the future, he must die to the past. And that's exactly what's been happening. So if you've been wondering why you've felt space open inside you, why you've had moments of unexplained release, why your body feels like it's grieving a timeline you didn't choose, it's because his soul is letting go of all the versions of him that couldn't meet your light, of all the stories that told him love was dangerous. That connection was weakness. That devotion meant losing himself. And yet, he still resists. Because even after the old self has died, the ego still wants to rebuild it. He may try to go back to old patterns, to old relationships, to old ways of distracting himself. but it won't work because the shell is cracked and light has already entered. There's no pretending anymore. He can ghost you, but he can't ghost his soul. He can block you, but he can't block the frequency of truth that's been imprinted in his body. He can silence you, but he can't silence the memory of who he was when he felt most alive with you. And that memory is becoming more real than the life he's pretending to live. So what happens now? Now, he fights the illusion. Now, he tries to reconcile what his heart feels with what his mind fears. Now, he begins the journey from unconscious resistance to conscious reclamation. Because sooner or later, the masculine realizes he's not running from you. He's running from the man he must become in your presence. And when that realization finally hits, his old self shatters completely. No more ego games, no more pretending, no more delay disguised as logic, just truth, raw, unfiltered, terrifying, and liberating. That's the moment union becomes possible. Not because he chased you, not because you waited, but because the parts of both of you that weren't aligned finally died. So if you're still looking for the man from the past, stop. He's gone. And if you're still hoping for the version of him that couldn't love you fully, release her too, because the real reunion won't happen between the old selves, but between the souls who've been forged in the fire. And he's almost ready to rise, even if he doesn't know it yet. There's something sacred happening now, not in your hands, not in your plans, but in the invisible space between your souls. It doesn't need to be forced. It doesn't need to be figured out. Because this next phase is not about control. It's about surrender. The divine masculine is surrendering, not with grand gestures, not with flowery words or heroic returns, but in silence, in the collapse of what he once thought love should look like, in the quiet release of all the identities that kept him guarded, in the subtle unraveling of who he was when he didn't yet know who you are. And you, divine feminine, you are surrendering too. But not to him, not to the outcome. You're surrendering to your own truth, to your light, to your expansion, to the path that kept whispering to you even when it hurt. Because reunion isn't a reward, it's a byproduct of alignment. And alignment only happens when you let go of who you thought you needed to be in order to be loved. So many times on this journey you've asked, why won't he choose me? What am I supposed to do? Will this ever come together? But those were never the real questions. The real question has always been, can I choose myself without closing my heart? Because that is surrender. Not giving up, not walking away with bitterness, but finally dropping the weight of waiting and rising into the love you were always meant to be. Reunion doesn't begin when he knocks on your door. It begins when your soul stops gripping and starts flowing, when your inner masculine surrenders to your feminine, when your energy no longer fights the timeline, when your light no longer dims itself, waiting for proof. He is awakening because you stopped chasing. He is remembering because you stopped explaining. He is rising because you stopped lowering your frequency just to meet him in his shadow. And now he has no choice but to meet you in your light. This is what real love does. It transforms, it humbles, it clears. It doesn't demand surrender as a condition. It evokes surrender as a revelation. So if it feels like everything is breaking open right now, let it. If it feels like your heart can no longer hold the past, release it. If it feels like your soul is being pulled into a new season, step into it. Because this is where reunion begins. Not in the perfect moment, not in the fairy tale ending, but in the ordinary breath where you no longer resist the truth of what is. He doesn't need you to wait. He needs you to trust. Trust that his path, no matter how delayed or distorted, is still divine. Trust that his breakdown is part of the plan. Trust that your growth was never wasted. And trust that love never lost its way. It only needed to strip away everything that wasn't love. So now, as he faces the mirror of who he must become, and you continue embodying the woman who no longer begs for love, a frequency shift happens. And in that shift, union becomes inevitable. Not because you chased it, not because you forced it, but because you surrendered to it. Because when two souls stop resisting what already is, they stop searching and start remembering. You were never meant to carry him. You were meant to awaken him through your embodiment. And now that you have, his soul is answering, so breathe, let go, hold your light. Because reunion doesn't begin with his return. It begins with your surrender. And the moment you fully release the story of how it should happen, you'll finally step into the truth of what's already been written. And what's written cannot be undone.